All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Built Not Born podcast. Man, I'm your host, David Kitchen, and today we got a dude in the house that is the definition of a leader, man. We have Forrest Tuff in the house. Forrest is a former college Hall of Fame basketball player turned entrepreneur. He's an award-winning author, a film producer, a master coach, a keynote speaker. This guy does a little bit of everything, man. He was featured in CIOTimes Magazine as a top 5 CEO to watch in 2024. He's also the founder of One Vision Productions, which is an award-winning media and branding agency. And then when we talk about what he does on the stage, man, he's been recognized as a top 100 speaker in the world and is also noted as one of John Maxwell's top leadership speakers. So when you're getting kudos from John Maxwell, you're doing something right, man. You're doing something right. So we're very fortunate to get some of his time today. We're going to dive into all things mindset, all things sports, all things entrepreneurship, and we're going to have a great conversation. So, Forrest, brother, welcome to the show.
Man, glad to be here, Coach Kitch. Thanks for that intro. I like that. That was nice.
Man, this is going to be fun. Hey, I joke about it, man, but I'm at a point now where, like, when I'm reading my guests' intros and their bios, it's like reading somebody's bucket list. Like, it's like my guests at this point have done these things that, man, I always read them and I'm like, that's somebody that's done some things right. And with that in mind, I want to jump right into this stuff because you went from being highly successful on the basketball court to then being able to shift that into entrepreneurship, to then being able to speak that into being on a stage and speaking. What has been the mindset that you've held on to that gave you success? Because I think there's so many lessons that can come from people who are successful in athletics. Like, what's the mindset piece that transferred over that has allowed you to kind of build beyond the basketball career?
I think the biggest piece for me as an athlete was just that never give up. Like, and we say never give up, but here's the thing. You have to know what you can succeed at. And I think for me, it was finding that space and then applying those principles to what I found that I was good at. So I would say don't give up on something that you can actually have success in. It doesn't mean you don't try things. And if it doesn't work out, you can pivot. That's what that pivot is. So yeah, you may have to give up on something that may not be in your lane. But I think once I found my lane, I applied those principles that I did as an athlete to just keep working, keep getting better, and just play that long game and just try to get to the championship,
That's it, brother. That's it. Finding your lane is so important. And I heard I believe it was Inky Johnson talking about, no, Eric Thomas talking about crossover moments, right? Like the first time that Allen Iverson did a crossover with a basketball and was like, "Oh, I'm different with this. Like, this is my lane. This is my thing," right? And I know for me, I've had that moment when I stepped into the coaching world as a college coach. Like, I was like, "Oh no, this is where I can thrive," right? And then when I stepped onto a stage, I was like, "Oh, okay, this is my lane. Like, communicating with people, navigating with people. This is something I can do at a high level." So I want to ask you, at what point did you kind of find that basketball was your lane? Like, did you always know, like, hey, I'm pretty good at this thing, man? Or was it something that you just alluded to with the never give up mentality? Like, what was your journey to that Division I level and then to put together a Hall of Fame career? Because that's no joke.
Yeah, I was actually one of those players. I was one of 5 kids. My oldest brother was just a natural athlete. I mean, his first track meet, true story. We didn't really know much about the sport at the time. He ran track. And so my dad bought him some football cleats because he thought they were track shoes. This dude broke the record in the 12 and under in the 100 and the 200. So I had that aspiration from seeing Big Bro, right? I was like, yeah, I'm going to be like Big Bro. And they wanted him to come play basketball, but he didn't want to. So I chose basketball to play. Unfortunately, I didn't have that natural right off the top. I was an athlete, but I had to unlock it. It was like that diamond in the rough. So I had that work ethic. I learned the work ethic of working hard. And what ended up happening is my work ethic and, going to the park back then, there wasn't any YouTube. So I went and played with the grown men at the rec league. And that's where I learned to have that tenacity on the court and just that, fight. And they would say, get up, you little man, come on, keep playing. And so for me, that toughness with that desire to be as great as my brother in something, to find my lane in being the second child, that second child syndrome, right? When I finally succeeded in basketball and I had started having success, I was like, this is it. This is my place. And, fortunately, back then I would study those Pistol Pete workout tapes. This is in the 90s. And I ended up going to a junior college, Gordon State College. And there is where I was inducted into the Hall of Fame. I led the state of Georgia in 3-pointers. I was third in the nation. And, I was averaging around 25.7 rebounds a game and 3 assists. I had a really stellar career, and I had the opportunity to go Division I. A school saw me at an all-star game and offered me a full ride, Western Carolina University. So I had a great career, but, unfortunately at Western, I had a career-ending injury. I severed the nerves in my shooting hand, and my career came to an end. But I had an awesome time just building and learning. And yet for me, it was the learning to not be afraid, getting out there, not being the tallest guy, going, okay, you know what? I'm going to dunk on somebody today. I will dunk on these people eventually. So it was the journey for me that was so amazing.
And you brought up so many great points in there that I think people need to hear. Number one being the game rewards toughness. Like, I worked with a head coach. He's now the head coach at James Madison University, Mark Byington. And he used to say that before every game. Like, the basketball gods reward toughness. Get out there, take a charge, get on the floor, do those things, do the dirty work, right? And I think that people that really like take that in and really internalize that, you can apply that to any area of your life. Like, I just did a podcast yesterday where a guy said to me, like, what's your it factor? Like, why are you successful?
Mhm.
And I said, man, it has nothing to do with talent. I'm not smarter than anybody. I'm not better than anybody. I just work hard. Like, I'm just willing to do the dirty work. And I think, especially in a game like basketball, sometimes that stuff goes unnoticed, right? But that's the stuff that wins games. And so you were obviously able to take that toughness and that resilience and say, okay, I'm now going to apply this to other areas of my life. And even furthermore, like, I hear all these entrepreneurship lessons in your story because you talked about going to junior college, right? And you understood that it didn't mean no, it just meant not yet,
Yep.
right? Like, the Division I dream wasn't over. It was just not yet. I got to go do this first, right? And so all of those things, when you put them all together, it builds an entrepreneur. Like, it builds all the skills that an entrepreneur needs. And so it's interesting to me to hear you say that stuff and then see where you're at now. When you look at the challenges you face as an entrepreneur, especially as somebody who's involved in so many businesses and so many different industries, what are some of the habits and strategies that you use now to navigate those? Because obviously it's a little bit different than in basketball where it was a physical game and it's like, no, I can just put out more, right? So what are some of the habits and strategies that you've been able to take that mindset and apply it to a business context and an entrepreneurship context when you face those challenges?
Well, one of the things I think with sports that is an unwritten, we talk about the physical attributes and the work ethic, but sometimes, you and I both know that's the mental toughness. That's the part that truly translates. And that's one of the things that's a market, that's a brand that I'm actually trademarking, Mentally Tough, TUFF, that's my last name. So it's the concept of being mentally tough, knowing that I'm facing an adversity of, you know what, I'm a small business owner. When I first started my production business, there were major production houses, major production companies, and I didn't fit the bill, but I had to recognize you got to start somewhere. You got to learn to build that. Just like you learn to dribble, just like you learn to shoot, it's a process. And so you've got to have success on a smaller level first. And as you begin to have success, you build on that. When you fail, you recognize, why did I fail? What is that lesson that I just learned? So now I can implement that and continue to go. Like you say, it doesn't mean no, it just means not now. And so as an entrepreneur, I use that mental capacity to help me continue to grow. I never saw my failures as it's not going to happen. It just meant, hey, it's going to happen, but you've got to take the time, be patient. Everyone has a different click. Some people can get it right off the top. You can't look at another person's success and have a problem with it. Take joy in their success and say, what can I learn from that person? Okay. Just like my brother was breaking records when he started, there's some people who got into business and, hey, man, they were 6-7 figures right off the top. That wasn't my story, but I played the long game. And I said, you know what? Let's play the long game, because it also built something in me that doesn't come with quick success. It built a tenacity to continue. So I think for me in business, the thing that I would say that translated, that helped me to grow in all of the areas that I've done, is just being mentally tough and knowing that it's a process and you'll get there.
And that's it's one of those things that we talk about as entrepreneurs, the ability to have thick skin, the ability to bounce
Yeah.
back. And I don't think people quite realize it. I know I didn't. Like before I actually started a business, there's no comparison to that feeling. And I'm sure you've had these as well when you're sitting on the floor and the rent's due and you're like, man, what am I, I don't know. I don't know
Yep.
about this thing, right? And you have
Yep.
this moment that's almost like, again, using the sports comparison, it's almost like a boxer or an MMA fighter when they're sitting in the corner and they're bleeding and they know, hey, in 10 seconds this bell's gonna ring and I gotta stand back up and I gotta
Yep.
figure this out, right? And
Got to
so
figure it out.
that's where that mental toughness comes in, and that's where that ability to be resilient, but it's also what you said there, where it's learning from your mistakes, right? Like amateurs chalk things up as luck, right? Like I'm a firm believer in this. Amateurs say, oh, I had good luck. That's why this worked out. Or I had bad luck and they blame it externally when things
Mhm.
go wrong. Pros and people that are going to be successful are people that look at their wins and their losses and they watch the tape. And they said,
That's
let me
right.
watch the film on this and let me see, okay, what allowed me to be successful in this, right? So if you start to get big, bigger projects for your production house, it's like, okay, what are the things that are allowing me to be successful in these projects and how do I make them standard operating procedures for us? And then on the
Absolutely.
flip side of that, hey, if this project didn't go well or we lost a bid on this or whatever, what caused us to do that? And then how do we make sure that that doesn't occur again? What are the things that we can put in place that will safeguard us from that? And that's again going back to the basketball piece, is watching the tape. Like if you know somebody's going to go right hand on you, it's like, okay, well then I better practice being able to go to the right or go to my left, right? If he's going right hand on me every time, that means I got to be a step quicker. If I'm getting beat baseline 100% of the time, well, then I guess I got to work on something, right?
That's right.
And so
Yeah.
that's such a vital lesson, man. And your story is one of resilience. Like your story and the way that you've made your mark. For those that don't know, this man was actually the original director for swag surfing. And so,
Yeah.
that's I mean, you want to talk about
Yeah.
something that was part of a generation that still played in stadiums, that still played on
Still
national
being played
TV.
now. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
that's unbelievable, so to get to that point from where you said you started, right, as a small production house, what were
Mhm.
some of those like pivotal moments? Like what were some of those moments that you were like, okay, this is starting to go. Like I'm starting to get it now. I'm starting to find my groove. I'm starting to feel confident in what I'm doing. And then obviously that culminates with something like swag surfing and then launches you into what you're doing now. What were some of those pivotal moments for you?
When I first started, I was always recording in high school. I was always taking pictures. I had a camcorder. I was out capturing moments just with friends. And I was a person they always knew, man, he captured these memories. I'm always telling these stories of things that, seem like tall tales now. But, when you were young and you were, hanging with your professional athlete friends, these were great memories. And so one time I'm hanging out with my buddies and someone said, hey, listen, how much would you charge to record this birthday party? And so I was like, yeah, I never thought about monetizing it. And that's how my business started in 2004. And so from there, I started out doing weddings, parties, a lot of celebrity events, because I knew different celebrities and people in the sports arena. And so I was working with a group, I did a couple of music videos, and that's how I came upon the swag surfing opportunity. And when I heard this song, I said to myself, I said, this is going to be huge. And the song ended up going viral on my YouTube page, and it's played on BET and MTV, and I think at the Def Jam South acquired it. I think with Jay Z, and
Mhm.
so they went in another direction. But I went to watch my daughter play. She's out in Miami University in Ohio, and during warmups, they were playing swag surfing. So it really grew. So that was where the initial part of my company grew. In 2010, I made a pivot because I wanted to go more into a corporate sector and more working with government agencies. So I remember trying to break into the corporate scene. I didn't have any background because my background was in retail. After I, finished college, I worked in retail at Foot Locker, Radio Shack, managing stores, and I did a little stint in corporate. So I said, how do I get into corporate? Well, I started to volunteer. I went to this major arts organization here called the Woodruff Arts Center, and they have tons of corporate sponsors. And I told them, I said, hey, listen, they were doing this big event with Sam's Target, a Fortune 100 company. And I said, we'll cover this event for free. Give us the opportunity to cover this for free. And if we can do this just as well as the organizations you with. Give us an opportunity to be a vendor. So they gave it. I brought all my team, I put all my resources forward. It was no expense I didn't spare to make sure that we did it right. We covered this event. We have rave reviews from the Woodruff, rave reviews from Target, and that's how it started. We became a vendor, a preferred vendor, and now that opened the door for us to work with Coke, so many other corporations, and that changed the scale of our business. And at that same time, I was also focusing on the paperwork to get involved with working with government agencies. So that really made a huge pivot in not only the amount that we were able to bring in, but the changes that happened within my company.
And again, it comes down to, though, it gets boiled down to the dirty work, right? It gets boiled down to one, recognizing opportunity, like you heard swag surf and you're like, oh, I could do something with this. But
Yeah,
then also when you wanted to break into that corporate world, it's like, okay, let me do the dirty work here. Like let
right,
me take these lumps, let me take this, what could have been, I'm sure for you, a mid six figure, high six figure contract, and say, let me do it for free. Right. And I think that is such a lesson to people starting out. Like, don't be afraid to put yourself out there. If you truly believe in what you're doing, people are going to see the value in it. Sometimes you just got to open the door for yourself, right? And so
right.
that was something that we used in our arena as well. We had success with Division 3 and Division 2 schools with our leadership workshops and our
Mhm.
keynotes and some of these things, but we hadn't been able to break into Division 1. And
Yeah,
so having the background that I had, I knew these coaches at the Division 1 level. And so I was like, hey man, like, you're my boy. Let me come do one for free. If you don't like it, no harm, no foul. We'll pay for our airfare. We'll pay for our hotel, whatever. If you like it, I want a testimonial. I want to be able to videotape. I want to be able to take pictures in your facility, the whole deal. And I'm not even going to tell anybody which one it was, because they'll never guess. And that was like the jumping off point for us. And then all of a sudden we were at the table, because it was like, we did this thing. They loved it. Rave reviews, like you said. And then all of a sudden the opportunity started to come in. But had I not been willing, and what people don't know is that was like my last couple $1,000s to go pull that trigger. Like, I was like, nah, man, we have to roll the dice at some point to be able to open these opportunities up. And so I think that, your ability to do that, those are the moments, man. Those are the moments that make or break businesses and make or break success stories, like yourself. And so when you're looking at, as your company is growing and as you're starting to get into these new levels and get into these new rooms with higher level players, and things are getting more intense, what did you do from a personal development standpoint to start to be like, okay, I have to level up because my business is going, things are going in the right direction? What were some of the areas that you focused on to start to create the mindset and start to create the habits to actually be able to be and play at those levels?
yeah. That's a great question, and it's so interesting the synergy and how we met and just think about progress. Bet on yourself. Bet on yourself, and you like you say you're at that last dime, but you're like, hey, I got to do it. And for me, I think as that pivot started to happen, I recognized I needed leadership development. So then I start to focus on what are the areas that I want to be more proficient in. Number one, communication. And as a leader, how do leaders think? So I went online and I started to find training in the city and also in speaking. One of the organizations that I joined, I became a mentor for an organization called SCORE. It's through the Small Business Administration. And so in this way, I began to give back to businesses and mentor, teaching some of the things that I learned. But in also doing that, I learned more about business because I was working with retired executives who had been over Fortune 500 companies, major companies. And now I had these people at my disposal to just ask questions because we were part of a network. We were family. So I used that opportunity to not only give back, but also get the training I needed. And then for communication, I joined an organization called Toastmasters. I mean, it was pivotal in just being able to gather your thoughts and speak to a larger community. Because as a basketball player and as a team captain, I was always proficient talking with a small group. I could motivate, I was great at sales. I knew how to motivate my teams, but this was on a smaller scale. I didn't do it in a bigger scale because I was more of a behind the scenes person. So Toastmasters helped me to really take my message out, to learn how to formulate a message that could speak to a broader audience. not just to people that either looked like me or had my same background, but, to be able to craft a talk or formulate a message that could resonate with a broader audience. So for me, that was where a lot of my leadership development came, and, also working with with boards and things of that nature. So it was a combination of giving back and learning from that perspective, and also paying to become better at what you did, and not just use your natural God-given talent, but also go get the training, because I thought that was paramount to my growth and moving forward.
There's no doubt. And when you look at people that really start to like hit those hockey stick moments where it's like boom and they really take off, there's always that realization of like, hey, I need to get better in these areas, and then they're willing to invest in those areas, right? So when you look at the leadership piece, man, that's such a smart move to get involved in a business like that and in a nonprofit like that. And I think you also played a really pivotal role that I talk about a lot with our clients, which is being in the mentor and mentee relationship at the same time. Like a lot of people think they get to a certain point where they're like, I don't need a mentor anymore, or they don't feel like they're ready to mentor somebody else. And I'm a firm believer that you should always have somebody that you're being mentored by and somebody that you're mentoring at the same time. Because if you want to know if you really know something, teach it to somebody else. Right. And so I think that's so important. So I love to hear that you did that. And then the Toastmasters piece, man, I'm such an advocate of people getting comfortable with the ability to speak in front of groups. And it is something that I was fortunate because of my background as a coach, similar to you. Like every day for me was a public speaking event, right? Because I'm talking in front of groups of anywhere from 5 to, at recruiting events, you're talking in front of 200 people, including families and everything else. So I was comfortable speaking in front of groups.
Mhm.
And that was a big part of what gave me a leg up when I started to do what I was doing as an entrepreneur, was the fact that I was comfortable in rooms. And
Absolutely.
I think that's a key skill. That communication skill is just so vital. But ultimately the overarching theme of what I just heard from you is the exact blueprint for somebody that's going to be successful when it comes to running a business, which is you made the shift from the hustler to the CEO. And that pivot, I think, buries a lot of people because it's a different skill set, right? To
It
be a
is.
hustler and to start to be scrappy and do the things that you were doing, like
Mhm.
that's that comes naturally to some people, and it comes from circumstance and it comes from experiences, right? But to be able to then pivot and say, okay, now I need to be a CEO. Now I need to start to look beyond the day to day. I need to see the long term vision. I need to be able to assemble a team, and I need to be able to get out of the way and let them do their jobs. And I
Yeah.
need to identify which way we need to move as a group. That's a completely different skill set. So what were some of the challenges that you felt like when you made that pivot, when you started to get into that CEO role and you now were a little bit removed from the day to day?
Mhm.
What were some of the things that you felt? And I'm asking this selfishly because as our business grows, like I find
Yeah.
myself, I'm making that pivot as we speak. And so it's something that I'm always interested to hear how other people handled that.
Yeah, that hustler is used to just getting it done. And you have a methodology, you actually have a strategy, and you just knock it out. So when you start to now manage people and motivate people, they move different. Even though they may have the same, you try to recruit people similar to yourself, and if you don't, that's the challenge. And the challenge for me was gathering the skills to learn how to effectively lead people, and not how to motivate them, how to recognize different motivational skills. That was a big challenge because you're now thinking, oh, it's great when someone is motivated just like you, but what if they're not? And what
Mm.
if you have to appeal to something different to get them to see it? And then when they do it, it's still not like you, but it gets the job done. That is the biggest challenge, is being okay with the fact that not everyone does it the way you do it. They can get to that place, but it may be a different process. And so it expands you. It makes you step out of that comfort zone. And that's the biggest thing, is you get out of your comfort zone. And the leadership portion is like, as a player, you have an idea. You always use a sports analogy. As a player, you have an idea who you are. When you become the CEO, you now start to look at yourself through the lens of a coach, how a coach may see you. And it's not always as amazing as you thought it was. And so now you have to say, you know what? I recognize I'm not as great here as I thought. So let me get the training. Now let me train my team. So for me, that process was just being transparent with myself and recognizing you're good, you're not great. So how do you get great? And you have to say that to yourself because that's always a place to allow you to grow. And I think the one thing I'll say about Toastmasters, again, there's 3 points to Toastmasters. There's the leadership, the speaking, and the listening component. That is the biggest part of growth and communication, is the ability to listen, not listen with an already formulated agenda, but listening to retrieve information that will help you to make a better move. And so for me, that's where my real growth came, is when I learned to calm down and listen and to take it in and process this information. It made me a better leader. It didn't take away from my leadership. Me listening to others and taking suggestions, it didn't take away from me as a strong leader, but I think it made me a better leader because I learned how to motivate different people to achieve different outcomes.
Right, right. That makes sense. Yeah. So it almost enhanced your leadership skills, right? It almost enhanced some of the things that you inherently had. It allowed you to look at it from a different lens. And I think the self-awareness piece is so crucial, right? Being able to take that step back and
That's
say,
huge.
yeah, hey, these are some of the areas that I need to grow in, right? This is something that
Yeah.
I need to do better. Let me ask you, just kind of off the script, did you feel
Mhm.
a little bit of a challenge? Because if you really think about it, right, business and creativity, like being a creative and an artist, kind of
Mhm.
clash a little bit, right? Because there's
Oh
black and
yeah,
white kind of rules. So
absolutely.
what was your growth process in like learning to balance those two, right? Because I know a lot of creatives struggle when they get into that CEO role, and that's why you see a lot of these startups where they bring on a seasoned CEO
Yeah.
instead of the actual creative founder being the one in charge. So how did you kind of figure out to navigate both lanes? Because those are really at odds on the surface.
So that's an interesting story. I alluded to how in my past coming out of college, I worked in retail. Well, I went into sales. And one of the things that happened, I was with Radio Shack and I was fast tracked to become a manager. So I went to something they had called Answers University. And we went out to, I think, Texas, and we did training. And they had this personality test. And in this personality test, it was on a score of 30, a scale of 30. And I was the only one there that had a scale of 15 to 15. And so they brought me up to the room. And it now makes sense because I'm actually ambidextrous. I had never thought about it. They said, he called me kind of a unicorn. He was joking. He said, here's somebody that's proficient in creative and also proficient in the business. And it didn't register at the time because I had no idea what that meant. I was just a new manager. Now, fast forward to now, just with you asking that question, I identify why I was able to make that shift. And it may be different for everyone, but I recognize that I enjoy the creative, but I'm not married to it. I'm never married to things. And I've said that so many times when working with other organizations. They'll go, well, how do you feel about this? I put all my heart into it. And I go, you know what? I'm not married to it. We can change it. But that's not as easy for those that are more creatively oriented, because there's a saying where creatives are sensitive about their stuff because it's
Mhm.
very personal. But a person that's analytical and business minded, they focus on the bottom line and making sure, hey, let's get to the ROI. Let's not focus on the small details and get caught up in this and miss the big picture. Fortunately for me, I was in a position where I actually navigated those pretty seamlessly. And I realized that that's not a normal thing. But for me, that was something that I was able to navigate seamlessly. I never really was too caught up in my product. I'm like, oh, yeah, it's great. I thought I was a great creative, but I think there are so many people that are creatively better. I think my strength is being able to be creative and also to meet a client's needs and have a synergy where we get to the bottom line and we make a profit and everyone is happy at the table. So I think that's a work in for most people. If you're really analytical, you tend to say, I'm not worried about the creative, but it would take some work, I think, on either end of the spectrum for me, that was more of a seamless. So I'll be honest and say that I don't think the curve was as hard for me in that particular role.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Because I do see a lot of people where they're creative, and even now in the freelance industry, right? We have this freelance generation of creatives that are out there, whether they're content creators, graphic designers, videographers, photographers. Obviously, with social media and short form blowing
Yeah.
up, there's a lot of opportunity out there. But I see some of them struggle to monetize because they're butting heads with clients, because they're not great at the business side, because they are, like you said, they get a little sensitive about their product, right? And it's
Yeah.
like that is a serious challenge. And I think that that's something that if you don't have the self-awareness to be able to step back and recognize where your strengths are, right? And not everybody is that unicorn that sits 50-50 and is
Yeah.
able to navigate both worlds. I think that can be really difficult. And I know even for me, I think I lean a little bit more towards the creative side than I do the business side. And so I know even at times, like if a client's coming back to me and they're like, hey, we want to do this, this, and this, I have to check my own ego, because it's kind of
Right.
like, wait, hold on a minute. I put my heart and soul into this content.
That's
Like,
right.
wait a second, you want to do what now? And
Absolutely.
and so you gotta kind of learn to check that, I think. And that can be really tough for people.
It is because you're coming from a place of, okay, you've given me an interpretation. Great. I'll give it to you. And you're like, this is amazing. And you bring it back. The last thing is someone's like, I mean, we really like it. Don't get us wrong. We like it. But you're like, oh, no buts. There's no buts here. And that is a real place. And it's not an imaginary line. That is a real line. And there have been times where I've done things and I'm like, I'm not married to it, but I was a little married to it, but I had to navigate it. So it does happen because you're right. It is something that, and just on the other end of the spectrum, if someone is really in line with the business and they present the numbers and you're like, oh yeah, we like these numbers, but hey, here's what we're thinking. It does rub them a little because they're like, I'm the expert with these numbers. So I think it's both ways, but as you say, we have to grow. We have to figure it out in order to continue growing. That's the challenges. You have to be like clay, and that is so hard, man. That is so hard. It's not an easy thing, but you have to first just recognize that you're dealing with it to say, okay, I get it. This is a problem I'm having. Now we got to find a way to get around it. So I think it's a challenge for anyone in general, and just sustaining a business over time. Like I say, this is 20 years for me. I started in 2004, and media has changed drastically since
Wow. Yeah.
2004. We were using tapes, and now we're going to SD cards, now just streaming, and so many different cycles and equipment. So I've had to be malleable in a say. I've had to be able to bend my thinking because the way videos look then don't look that way now. And we stretched out into other things, of course, animation, branding, those type of things. But it's just the constant growth that I think is paramount for anyone who wants to be in business.
Well, and the value of a team, right? The value of
Oh
having
yeah,
having yin and yang around you, like things to balance you out. Like
absolutely.
like me and my business partner joke about it a lot because he's the numbers guy. Like I say it
Yeah.
I've said in workshops, it kind of picked up steam and got some traction on social media because there was a workshop where I said if an email comes across my desk and it has an Excel spreadsheet on it, there's
Hmm.
a 90% chance that I don't even open it. I just send it to him. Like I'm
Right.
like, bro, I don't even want to. That's not my thing. That's
That's
not my
right.
deal.
That's right.
And so I think the value of having that team. Now, obviously, you have multiple businesses across. Is there
Mhm.
any like commonalities that you look for, like when you're trying to hire those A players? Because it's obvious that you have built multiple successful businesses, which means you're recruiting the right people and then you're retaining those people. What
Right.
are some of the commonalities that you look for across the board when you're like, hey, these are people that can help push our team forward, aside from the technical piece?
Yeah. I like people who care about their personal brand.
Okay.
And
That's
that's an
different.
interesting thing because your brand is you. So no matter who you're working with, it's your brand. It's like that has my name attached to it. I don't want it to be anything because if you put your name on something, you may want to show it to a potential client in the future. So it matters how it comes out. So I love people that care about their own personal brand because if you're able to show how what they're doing is always going to be attached to them, it's something that they can monetize. Like, listen, This is a job now that you can say years from later, hey, I work with White House Black Market. I work with this government agency, this billion-dollar company. That's going to always be attached to you. Whether or not you're with One Vision Productions or with Forrest Speaks International, whether you're with that or not, that's always a part of your brand. So when you put your name on it, make sure that it's something that can represent you in the future. So I always have those type of conversations about the personal brand because my approach is a little non-traditional because I started my business non-traditional. So I care about that. I also care about a person's history of how they do things, how they present themselves. That all goes into their brand, how they present, how they care about the job. What do they do when they come to the interview? And also, what do their people say about them? Because I do care about recommendations. Like you can talk smooth, you can sound great. I want to know what other people have to say about you. So that's been my process. And I've been able to have a modicum of success with the people that I've brought on in that way. And so for me, it works.
Yeah. And when you look at hiring, it's such a challenging thing. Like we're getting to the point now where we're hiring. I've had experience hiring before because I was in coaching, so I'm looking for assistant coaches and I'm bringing people in, and it's a
Yeah,
lot of the same things that you were talking about there. Like, do you care about the brand? Like, do you care about how you're represented as an extension of, whatever university we're a part of, and now as an extension of Edge Leadership Academy? Like everything that says, does it have your signature on it, and are you proud to have your signature on it? And I think
absolutely.
that, to me, I was always somebody that looked at character. Like I was always like, I can teach you the technical stuff. Now obviously your industry is a little bit different. You can't have a huge learning curve, right? But there
Right.
were some things that we had some wiggle room on that I'm like, I can teach you some of these things, but I can't recruit character. I can't recruit loyalty. Like I can't teach,
Absolutely.
I can recruit those things, but I can't teach those things.
Right.
And so I think that ultimately became a real philosophy for us that I'm trying to now carry over to our business, which
Yeah.
is when we recruit, I want to recruit people that are high character, people that are extremely loyal,
Mhm.
those types of individuals. Because to me, once you have a culture of those types of people, the direction that you go in becomes a lot easier to attain, right? Because those people,
Absolutely.
they understand it and they're able to act on what you're asking them to act on. So I think that that's such a challenging thing for leaders, though, but it's something that you need to spend time on, is really going through it and reflecting on and analyzing your hiring process and how you're bringing people into the team. There's a reason that
Absolutely.
colleges recruit, right? There's a reason that they go through and they want to do that screening process and see
Yeah.
who's coming in. And I think some businesses get caught up in data and get caught up in resumes, and it's like, no, we're just going to hire this person. And it's like, there's more to it than that. There's more
There's more
to
to
it.
it. Because
It's
we really preached our vision, our mission, our value statements. That's a part of that thing that you're talking about, integrity, character, respecting human beings. That's built into what we do. One of our main focuses has been customer service. And in order to have great customer service, once again, that's that retail background. Customer service is you have to care about people. You
Mhm.
have to actually listen to people, care about what they're saying. And, it takes a certain person to actually care, you know, to give you what you need, not just get the money, right? Getting the
Right.
money is, of course, that's the bottom line, but, the experience. What was it like what was it like being with Coach Kitch? You would love if every kid was like, man, this was a great experience. I learned so much. He was tough sometimes, but I knew he cared about me. And that is a different mindset when you find a coach that can be hard on you, can give you wisdom, can love you, but you knew at the end of the day they cared about you. That made all the difference in how you received what they were saying to you. So we try to embody that in our offerings with our clients. They know that we really care, and the people that are part of the team have that same mentality. If you talk with anyone from any department, it's like, they really care about what we're saying or about what we're trying to bring to the table. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. Character, integrity, that means so much in sustaining your business and building relationships, which is about people. Business is about people.
It's the people game. No matter
Yeah,
what industry you're in the people industry. And I
absolutely.
think, sometimes that again, it gets lost in a world of data and spreadsheets and all these different things. But ultimately it's always going to win, right? So I joke with our clients sometimes and I say, listen, you can either invest in your culture and your leadership, or you can get beat by companies that do. Like that's the name of the game. You can spend what you want to spend in R&D, but if you're not investing in your people, man, you're in trouble. You're in trouble
You're
because
right.
that's what drives the ship, and it's interesting to watch how you weave those things together, right? And I think it's when you just brought up your core values, watching how you weave your core values into the core values of your business. Like one of your core values is, and this is kind of what made me think of it, is you say customer service is one of your core values as a company. One of your values as a human, right, is service. And you're so active in the philanthropy world and the things that you do. Where does that come from? Where does the service piece come from? And before we even answer that, let me just say congratulations for being able to weave your personal vision, mission, values into your professional vision, mission, values. Because anytime I see an entrepreneur whose business is aligned with their personal, it has a greater chance of success. It just does. When you're
Thank
trying
you.
to compete at odds, it's almost impossible to do.
Yeah.
So where does that attitude of gratitude and that service piece come from for you? Was that something that you grew up with, or just something you gravitated towards?
I think it may be a personal trait, just my makeup. Like I said, I'm a second kid, second child. We have a little bit of empathy for everything that's happening. But I'm a PK. I'm a pastor's kid. My dad was a preacher. He didn't become a preacher until I was 8, but my dad has always been a person that has cared about people. My mom, they've always been empathetic to people and just been there for people on so many different levels. And I think growing up, seeing them create an example for me, and that I think that's where it really stemmed from. I think having a mother and a father in my particular situation, having my parents still together and have them show me through example and how they treated people, that's something that I came to value. I came to value the relationship, and I saw how they've helped so many people. And so, throughout my life, I've been on missions trips. And so that started my whole, philanthropic adventures. I was doing a lot of community service personally. And so now I've really infused that into my organization with making sure we give back to local nonprofits. Right now I'm a part of a organization, Rise Teen Summits, and Rise, we're helping young entrepreneurs learn how to start their business. And so we go in and we're teaching the pitch, the skills, and they present their ideas. And that's something that has really resonated with me. And that's why I like focusing on the youth. I've been with a lot of organizations that focus on youth because they're impressionable. And I think you can mold them with all the stuff they have. They have so many different, ways to learn with social media. And some of these ways aren't always correct. Some are good, but being able to sit down with them, talk to them, answer questions, and help them guide those minds for future leaders for me is very important. And I'll get so much fulfillment out of it when I see these kids happy and I see them, come out later and they're adults and I see them speaking, doing things. I'm like, man, that's awesome. So for me, I think it's a fulfillment. I think giving, it helps. It's better than just taking all the time. If you're a person who gives, man, it can help you feel better about just doing something positive in society. So for me, that's why I'm so infused into everything that I do.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like as I was doing my research on you, it was almost not almost, it was as prevalent in the articles as the business endeavors that you had. Like it was like every other article, it was like I'm reading one about what you've done from a business standpoint, and then the next one is about what you're doing in the community. And I'm like, oh, this guy really like he walks the walk. Like it's not just I cut a check at the end of the year to
Yeah.
escape taxes. Like, no, this dude is actually he's in the trenches doing the thing. And I think that it's so commendable to me. And I don't know if you feel this way. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I know for me personally, being the product of a single parent household, being an African American male, I feel a certain responsibility that because I've been able to build a platform, I've been able to build certain things. I feel a responsibility that I have to give back,
Yeah.
and I have to take the mic as a role model, right? Because like you said, there's so many ways that kids can learn now, and there's so
Yeah.
many influences coming at them from so many different ways. And so I feel like it's our responsibility as people that are successful and people that have had some level of success and are doing things the right way to make sure that we are out in front and that we are
Absolutely.
amplifying our voices and giving them an opportunity to learn and be around us. So I know I've partnered with nonprofits on some different events before and done some different things. We're running a big this spring. We're actually doing, shameless plug here. We're doing a partnership with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Association. So we'll be doing cancer research fundraising this summer or this spring. So be on the lookout for that. All our listeners, make sure you guys tap in and donate to that. That's a great cause. But I truly believe, man, any opportunity that I get to go to speak with high school kids or younger, or the youth in any way, I'm like, man, I have to go do this. Like, it'd be selfish not to, even if it's squeezing into my schedule. It's like,
Yeah.
no, because there was people that poured into me, right? And there was coaches that took time when they didn't have to, and you don't realize it when you're young, right? But those coaches you had families, man.
That's
And
right.
and so every time they sat with you and talked in the office or after a tough game or whatever, like that was time that they were giving up with their wife and their kids. And so, who am I to say that I'm more important than to be able to go out and spend some time with the youth and be able to give back, man. So I appreciate when other people feel that way. And I think, like I said, it's our responsibility to push this thing forward and continue to be the best role models that we can be.
Absolutely. And you said something that was so pivotal, and this is something I really would like the listeners to hone in. I came from a background with a mother and father. Coach Kitch said he had a single background, but you notice when you come out healthy, when you come out of an environment that's healthy, you're able to give back. And, really, it's not about the experience because we all learn from experience. Even now, as a person who came from, having a mother and father, I actually went through a divorce and I was remarried and I have a family that's conjoined that way, kids from different marriages, but I've still been able to create a healthy environment. And so with that, you want to make sure you just continue to breed positivity. And, it works different for so many people. Like, I don't condemn people that have had a bad experience and they may not be able to see it. But I do feel like if you're in a situation where you are able to see the silver lining, man, try to pass that silver lining on because someone actually needs that. There are some people that can't get over life oppressions and some people can't get through certain things, but those adversities, if they're not, some of the greatest people have the most adverse upbringing. I'm like, wow, it's like that's almost a recipe for success or extreme failure. But either way, if you can do that, like I tell my kids, listen, make the best of these situations, do the best that you can and try to move in a positive light because if you focus on negative things, it'll hinder your growth. It'll just hinder you and you'll become the person that's always, this won't work or I can't do this. Just try to stay in a positive light. And it doesn't mean you're not going to have challenges, but just try to see the silver lining as best you can.
Right. You're 100% right. And it's interesting that you say it that way because I look back at my own childhood and like we were poor. Like, I mean, there's no way around it. I mean, I remember story I always tell is we used to pack lunches for the Salvation Army, right? And we'd be in there, making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, whatever, packing them in the
Yeah.
brown bags for the summer. And my mom would always be like, hey, make sure you ride the bike behind the van. And when they drop them off at the youth center, make sure you grab two, one for you and one for your brother. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, I'm getting a free PB&J out of this. Like, I'm in.
That's,
This is dope. What I
that's right.
didn't realize was like, oh, we were the family that needed help. Like, hold on, like she was sending me, but she led with love, right? She led with service first. And it was like, I never realized those things, but it's exactly what you said. She took an environment that on the surface looked unhealthy and turned it into a very loving environment and a very healthy environment that allowed me to then become, who I am now and allow my brother to have the life that he had. And
Yeah.
I think that we all have the capability to do that.
Mhm.
But it becomes a choice, right? It becomes a
It,
choice
it
of
does
of
become a
of
choice.
finding those things and saying I'm not going to be a victim. My mom, like I said, I don't want to harp on it. This ain't the Mother's Day episode, but I love her to death. She always deserves her flowers. So
Yeah.
she always found a way to make that thing positive and make the best out of a bad situation. And I think that 100% passed down to me.
Yeah.
100%. Like when I look at things and I'm always like, man, I look at what I went through as a kid. I can get through this. Like I'm good,
That's right.
and that resilience I think comes from her. So those, to the parents out there, those of you that might be becoming parents, like you have so much impact because a lot of those behaviors are caught, not taught. So it's not just what you're saying, it's how you're modeling it as well.
That's right. Kids are watching. Kids are
That's
watching.
100%,
They
brother.
are learning and
100%.
watching. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Let me ask you this last question, man, and then we'll hit you with our wild card as we start to wrap up here.
All right.
When you're balancing all these businesses and you're balancing all these things that you're involved in the community, and then you're also balancing being a family man and a father and a husband, and like you said, you have a conjoined family, so you have a larger, a blended family. Like,
Yeah.
how do you manage that stuff? How do you find balance? And I know balance is kind of probably the wrong word because it's more integration than it is balance. But
Yeah.
what are some of the approaches that you have that have been successful for you?
I really I had to focus on my family because I have 3 kids, two of them are graduating from college, getting their masters, and I have a 10-year-old. So I had to make sure that their life didn't come secondary. If I went to a little league game, that was a 6-hour drive. Had to do it. I had to put aside things that I enjoyed. There's a sacrifice of being an adult. There's also this thing of when you become a person who's created your bed, you have to lay in it. So I focused on what have I created? What have I done? Now, how do I make it work? And the sacrifice had to come with me personally. I had to sacrifice a lot of things that I wanted, a lot of personal things that I wanted to do for the sake of my children and my family, my wife. And so I think that's a place of it's a place of humility. You have to come to a place where you say, you know what, you got to eat the crow, you got to eat it, you got to do it. And now my focus was I can build my business. I'm going to focus on that business. So I channel that energy of, just things I may have liked personally into things that I enjoyed, but that would actually help my family grow.
Right.
And so as I began to do that, it started to become seamless. It's like most things, if you practice it long enough, it no longer becomes an effort. It just becomes a part of your lifestyle. So I had to force myself to get in that lane. I had to force myself to change my habits and look at how I approach things. And after time, it became integrated where, they were part of what I did. They started to enjoy it. Now I'm on set working on a film and they want to work with me. So it started to my life became a blend. It wasn't a forced venture. It was like, I want to be a part of your life. And they're like, well, I want to be a part of yours. And so it just happened to work that way. And I'm glad it did. And so for me, I think that's something, and also allowing, my wife to find her space. Where does she fit in this in the environment and give her the space, not to be, hey, now you're a stepmother. You got to be this. No, you're my wife. Find your space. They have a great relationship, and now she became a mother. So it was a balancing act. And I would say for a man, I would challenge any man that is going down this path to say, hey, you got to man up.
I love it.
That's
I
just what it
love it,
comes
man.
down to. You got to man up.
Thank you so much for that. Thanks for that answer. I think that's again, it's I always try and get the deeper questions in there. I want to find
Yeah,
out, what makes people successful because, we all know success can bury just as many people as failure. And so
absolutely.
if you're not thinking about all these things that go into building businesses, being a community leader, being a father, being a husband, if you're not looking at all of them, it's the punch you don't see coming is the one that's going to knock you out. So I think asking these questions are so important, man. As we wrap here, we always like to hit our guests with the wild card questions. So the way this rolls, super quick. Don't think about it. Just the first sentence that comes to your mind. All right. So this is
All
the
right,
creative side. Let's go to that 50% creative now.
let's do
All
it.
right. So what does the word legacy mean to you?
My kids,
What do you want your legacy to be?
impact.
Love it. What's the best piece of advice you ever got?
Don't sweat the small stuff
And if you weren't doing what you're doing, where would you be?
in the NBA.
In the NBA. I love it. I
I
love it,
would
man.
have made it to the league.
That's great. That's great. Man, thank you so much for your time today. This has been unbelievable. I know I took a lot of notes. I got a lot of value out of this. Man, if
Same here,
people want to
coach.
connect with you, if there's business owners out there that maybe want you to come in and speak, if they want to find out more about One Vision Productions and what you're doing with that, where can people find you?
The best place to go to find out everything, forresttuff.com. And that's Forrest, 2 R's, 2 T's, 2 F's.com. ForrestTuff.com. It'll get you to my business, film, philanthropy, and anything speaking, and we can have a conversation.
I love it, man. Thank you so much for your time today, guys. If you get a chance, please check out Forrest, everything that he's got going on. This is the type of leader that we need in the world, and so I'm extremely grateful to have his friendship and be able to connect with a guy like this and bring you guys some of the insights from his life, man. And as always, this is your weekly reminder: leaders are built, not born.